Cycling for me has never been about the bikes. They've only ever been the prerequisite tool. I do not see just a bike race, I see riders on heroic journeys and warriors doing battle. At one point, cycling was the most popular sport in Europe because newspapers told magnificent tales about epic races and crafted the great champions into legends. But with the advent of television, cycling lost some of its mystique, and that golden age of journalism and narration has perished. So now let us try to return some romance to the beautiful sport. Let us praise and give glory to phenomenal performances to be remembered for decades to come. Let us dwell on the moments that inspire and move us. Let us chronicle the rise and fall of heroes. Let us chart these life-changing journeys, these cycling odysseys. All right, welcome back to another episode of Cycling Odysseys. I'm your host, Patrick Santino. Let's just jump straight into it. Today, we're doing early season Smorgasbord number 3. I'm not sure if the race's proper name is the Ruta del Sol or the Vuelta a Andalucía, but whichever it is, that is the one I'm beginning with now. With no time trial, with no time bonus seconds anywhere on course or at the finish, the 5 days were set for very unbridled racing. It turned into an excellent primer or starter pack of how and why cycling is chess on wheels. On the first stage, all the World Tour teams screwed up to let the breakaway have a massive lead they could not close. All the World Tour teams had to chase hard to just have a chance at the overall race lead in the days to come. But on that first stage, Top Sport Vlaanderen's Rune Hertegoets took the victory and the race lead. Stage 2 finished with the peloton roaring into the El Calcala La Real goat track climb within the town itself. The finish was excellent and awesome and won by UAE's red-hot Alessandro Covi over a cool and calm-looking Superman Lopez of Astana, Kazakhstan. Stages 3 and 4 is where the chess moves really heated up in an intimidating desert landscape, and both were too much for me to describe all that happened. Stage 3 was a rip-roar, where Grand Tour GC favorites were putting in attacks and counterattacks, but in the end, it was the young 19-year-old American Magnus Sheffield the Grenadier who gave everyone the slip with a 1-kilometer flyer to take his first professional victory. Stage 4 was also awesome with the same GC contenders like Bike Exchange's Simon Yates, Bahrain's Mikel Landa, and Superman Lopez in an elite breakaway halfway through the stage that Team UAE could not control for race leader Alessandro Covi. From that elite breakaway, after a series of moves and counterattacks, it was Bahrain's Wout Poels and Astana's Alexei Lutsenko that found themselves at the front of the race with a 30-second lead on the rest of the super break. Surprisingly, it was Wout Poels that defeated Lutsenko in the sprint to take the stage and the leader's jersey, leapfrogging Superman Lopez half a minute behind. Finally, on stage 5 was another minor chess match between a breakaway of riders out of contention for the GC. It was a good and strong victory from Bora's Emmanuel Buchmann over Iolo's Lorenzo Fortunato, Alessandro Covi, and Magnus Sheffield. Behind, Wout Poels and his Bahrain team held all the GC riders together for the finish to allow him to retain and seal the 68th edition of the Ruta del Sol. Simultaneously run as usual to the Ruta del Sol is the Volta ao Algarve in the southwest corner of Europe at the southern tip of mainland Portugal. It was a traditional Algarve. It was another excellent Algarve. Stage 1 sprint was won easily by Fabio Jakobsen off of his Quick-Step Wolfpack's lead-out train that included Remco Evenepoel smashing everyone under the Flamme Rouge. On stage 2, the GC contenders flew up the finishing climb to Foyot. Shockingly, it ended up in about a 15-up sprint, despite the difficulty of the climb. Remco, the pre-race favorite, was nestled in there, but without the legs to sprint for the win. Instead, the win looked like it was about to come from the sprightly and springy new Bora Hansgrohe transfer, the diminutive Sergio Higuita, recently recrowned the Colombian champion. But as Higuita was careening around the group of leaders on the last bend like a high-speed bird of prey, Jumbo's Norwegian champion, Tobias Foss, collided with Higuita mid-sprint and both hit the deck as Groupama's David Gaudu went on to take the victory. The next day on stage 3, Jakobsen won again over Alpecen's Tim Merlier and Cofidis's Brian Cocard. Stage 4 was a very respectable 32-kilometer individual time trial, a big, decisive distance for such a small stage race. It was not a surprise to learn that Remco Evenepoel won the time trial, but it was a surprise to see him obliterate a top-notch time trialist like Groupama's Stefan Küng by a whopping 50 seconds. And Küng was second place on the stage. Remco won the GC that day and only had to finish it off on stage 5 up a tough 3-kilometer climb that finished in Malhalo. The stage was raced hard, but in the end, the GC favorites of the race all started the final climb together. Up it, Remco made a bid for the win, but others still had his number and were hungry for the stage win now that the overall was out of reach. Over the top of Remco's attack came UAE's American Brandon McNulty in the final dash for glory, but around him came Lieutenant Danny Martinez, the Grenadier, with his feisty Colombian compatriot and friend Sergio Higuita, glued to his wheel. Martinez was ferocious, sprinting for the line, but Higuita had the speed to come around him and take the final stage victory while Remco took the overall. Despite the dynamic racing at the Ruta del Sol and Algarve, as has come to be expected in this early season slot, surprisingly, neither were my favorite stage race of the week. That honor goes to the small French Tour de Alpes Martime at Duvar, which has really grown on me these past 2 editions. I watched it last year because nothing else was on. I watched it this year because, well, I don't really know why. Perhaps fear of missing out, perhaps to fill out this week's Smorgasbord, perhaps because GCN made it easily available, perhaps it did not occur to me until now that it is bizarre to watch 15 races over the course of 5 days. Probably all of the above. Anyways, it turned out to be a great decision. The race takes place on the Côte d'Azur, which I am on record of saying is my favorite scenery in all of cycling. It did not disappoint this weekend. The lighting seemed great or perfect, as the races must have finished very close to the late winter golden hour, and the racing that complemented that scenery was excellent. Stage 1 was by no means flat, but it was the only opportunity for the sprinters. Over the many rip-roaring hills along the blue coast of the Mediterranean, the escape artists tried to force something, but the sprinters' teams just managed to hold it together, and it was Lotto's Caleb Ewan that took the victory ahead of Total Energies' Anthony Turgis. Total Energies headliner signing Peter Sagan dropped early in his debut race of the season, but to see his teammates like Turgis and Bodnar last week in Provence looking so competitive gets me fired up to see what the Total Energy Classics team can achieve this spring. But we switch gears, literally. For the next 2 stages, we're up mountainous tests. Stage 2 finished with a big 10 or 12 kilometer climb that was steepest at the bottom and shallower towards the top. Arkea Samsic's king of Colombian cycling wasted no time. Nairo Quintana went to work right from the bottom of the climb, dropping almost the whole field besides Cofidis' Guillaume Martin. Martin held Quintana's wheel for a while, but just as he did last week to the world champion musketeer, Nairo Man twisted the knife on Socrates Martin. Quintana looked good, but how great of shape was the musketeer in last week, and how good of shape was Martin in this day? Additionally, surprisingly, this stage was not decided. As the gradients eased, one man had not yet settled for his lot. You know he had to make an appearance. You know he could not go unnamed. Mr. Early Season, Tim Wellens of Lotto Soudal, clawed his way back to Martin halfway up the climb and passed him without letting up. For the last handful of kilometers, the gradient really eased back, and Wellens started to gain momentum on Quintana up front. Within the last 4 kilometers, the race really did become a 2-man pursuit. Tim Wellens got Quintana in his crosshairs. The gradient was shallow enough that they were now both more so time trialing than climbing at very high speeds. With 2 kilometers to go, Wellens caught Quintana, and Nairo Man gave Wellens a rude welcome, telling him to work immediately. Wellens got his breath back, did somewhat swap turns over the last 2 kilometers to put more time into everyone else, but in the 2-up sprint, Wellens predictably, handedly beat Quintana for the stage win and the race lead. But it was stage 3 that really stole the show. The stage finished with a massive descent and a last bit of undulating territory. Up the final major climb, the peloton was shattered, and over the top, Groupama FDJ's Thibaut Pinot had a solo lead for the descent down. Chasing him was Nairo Man Quintana again with Guillaume Martin, a Groupama anchor for teammate Pinot, and a Total Energy rider I can't remember. Nairo Man went vintage Nairo Man this day, circa 2014, attacking like a badass in the Giro with ferocious aggressiveness. Nairo Man seemed to take every risk to perfection to reel in Pinot and drop the others with him on the descent. Behind, Tim Wellens in the yellow leader's jersey also descended like a stone to catch the Martin group, but by the time he got there, Quintana had already caught Pinot ahead. On the next few short uphill drags, Nairoman absolutely cracked and ripped the legs off Pinot, who dropped back to the chasers, and Quintana was free to fly. Quintana continued taking descending risks, and they continued paying off. In the final kilometers, there were a few uphill sections, and Quintana's lead ballooned further as the climbing began. Once again behind, Guillaume Martin found separation to be the second best, but it was all about Nairoman up front. Nairo Quintana looked great and had a phenomenal day. As said last week, this was a carbon copy start thus far to his 2020 season. Oh, how great it would be to see vintage Quintana have a clear run at the flying season all the way into the Summer Grand Tours. Alright, so I'm just going to end it here because got a lot going on this week. More to come this week as well, for sure. Thanks for listening, everybody. Vive la cyclisme.